a really good challenge to those that are thinking about AI for the public good and in the interest of the many. Feels like, the sort of the first line of the code, doesn't it? In terms of actually, well, what should AI be there to deliver? And of course, thinking about the jobs of the future and letting us all know about them is the job of this next panel. It's called the Jobapocalypse, which is probably something we're going to challenge, I hope. How do we future-proof the job market? We're going to be joined for this by Lou Cordwell, who is Lou Cordwell OBE, who's the Director of ID Manchester, Chief Creative Officer for Magnetic and Chair of the Greater Manchester LEP. We're welcoming back Ash as well, from CEO of Academy, Anna Thomas, who's from the Institute for the Future of Work, and Tom Nixon, who is the Head of Government Practice at the Faculty of AI. Do give them a big round of applause. Come and take a seat, guys. Pardon? Do you not know your order? I think you're here, Lou. Ash is there.
I think I'm at the end.
Anna, you're there. It's like an algorithm, isn't it? There you go. So, that's beautifully done. You see, we're not redundant yet, are we? Right. Well, I just think that's a really good challenge. What are the jobs of the future? Because actually, we've got a senior politician listening. Lou, what do you sort of make of this whole debate? Are you excited about it? What do you think is going to pop up the other side? What are we talking about in a year's time, do you think, or even longer?
Longer is probably the biggest challenge, isn't it? I think, I am optimistic. I mean, I got into tech 25 years ago because of my passion for its power to democratise. I think we've kind of slightly lost our way a little bit in the meritocracy along the way, and I think hopefully the publicity and the debate that we're now getting on the back of AI begins to focus some of that conversation around what constitutes fairness and equal opportunity. And I think Lucy's absolutely right. Skills is at the centre of that conversation, how we enable those pathways. I think the honest answer is nobody actually knows what the jobs are going to be in 5 to 10 years. And what we've certainly learned in a Manchester context is, therefore, you need the agility, which is often not a word associated with education and the skills system in this country. So I think what we've learned is there's a kind of more entrepreneurial approach that's obviously championed by people like Ash. But there's also a kind of policy approach that means that you have to begin to localise the control of those skill systems so that you can flex and be more agile in line with whatever those employer needs are going to be. But what we know is we can't write a skills roadmap now for 10 years and it play out beautifully and meet all the needs of employers. So.
Now, I'm going to give each of the panellists a chance in a minute to tell us a little bit about their own day job. But I just think picking up, Anna, on Lucy's thoughts there about preparing for this unknowable future, and actually hearing Lucy, actually because we don't know, we've got this great anxiety. I mean, how does anxiety become confidence when you look at the future of work? Because that ultimately is what seemed to be once upon a time a job that only would be for a very few, working in tech, working in software, suddenly becomes socialized and becomes much more acceptable. Are there points of psychological change that we have to go through as a society to get ready for this change, do you think?
There are points of all sorts of change, including psychological. I think perhaps it's helpful to start with what we know, and perhaps in answering your question and starting the conversation, I can share some results from a survey we've done with Warwick Business School about how AI and autumn technologies are being used, and what the predictions are of CTOs in firms across the country, done by Professor James Hayton, I should say, as part of the Pissarides Review. So 80% of the firms surveyed said that they had introduced AI or automation technologies for both cognitive and manual tasks. And they and also a very high number, nearly 80%, 79%, said that it wasn't just job creation. There would be job creation, and just over 50% job loss too. So we're talking about a huge range of changes to not just the number of jobs, but the nature of jobs, the condition of jobs, the quality of work, right across sectors.
And Tom, you're looking at the kind of, I suppose, the safe deployment. You're looking deeply at the technology itself. How are you feeling in terms of what you're looking at, in terms of how confident as consumers, as workers, how confident as people should we be about the deployment of AI?
So I think reasonably confident. I think if we look at the what we're doing at the moment, we're We essentially are building, deploying AI systems for public sector, private sector, big, small organizations, particularly over the last sort of 6-9 months with the rise of generative AI, essentially deploying the tech underpinning ChatGPT, that type of tech, into different workflows, into different, solving different problems. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is there's a sort of, in terms of sort of the ways you can do that safely, there's a whole bunch of tech that can and needs to be built to essentially almost sort of general purpose tech that can sit around the general purpose models themselves to make that deployment safe. So I can sort of unpack that if helpful, but that, I think, yes, confident on that. In terms of what that will mean for jobs and the sort of nature of jobs, I think we're really only scratching the surface of that. So I think essentially what we're seeing at faculty, we're seeing the big, large organisation, including people represented in the room, each making sort of market-facing, very large announcements on investments in AI, job reductions. This is sort of corporate strategy. If they're not doing that, they're getting a hammering in the markets, etc. But there's a sort of that's going on, sort of the the big forward look. But then in terms of right here, right now, it's the sort of really at the early stages experimentation, foothills. Let's try building something, but not even really yet thinking through, well, what does that mean for overall workflows? What does it mean for jobs? What does it mean for how our current teams are going to have to evolve how they work to be more productive, etc. So I think that is just getting going.
Now, Anna, like I said, you want to come in, I'm just going to give Ash his opening remark, then I'll come straight to you. But I suppose thinking about what we've just heard is we're at this kind of like moment where it feels like the wheels are turning. We may well look back on a kind of, well, this was an age of change, which might be akin to the Edwardians becoming a modern society. And I suppose how we prepare ourselves as workers of today for the economy of tomorrow, Ash. I mean, that strikes me as the driving question at the heart of all of these responses. Give us an academy point of view and says, well, how do you do that? What are the tips? What's the advice you'd give us?
Profound question. I mean, firstly, I want to say I'm incredibly excited by the potential of AI to be a leveler, to be a source of opportunity for everyone in society. If I think back to kind of my own career, if you like, I was brought up in a pretty underprivileged area of inner city London, on sort of free school meals and not really any potential role models. So the idea that you could go to Oxbridge, I didn't, and get a professional job in one of the sort of big magic circle or sort of consulting, banking, whatever the prestigious jobs were, that felt to be kind of totally inaccessible. And through a bit of a quirk of fate, I ended up working in this industry called technology, up in Manchester for a company called the Hut Group, joining as a 23-year-old with not many skills and just some ambition. And because that was a kind of rocket ship experience, a startup that went to a multi-billion company from 50 people to 5,000, it was the most extraordinary journey of social mobility for me personally, created a lot of opportunity. And then we saw that it actually had the potential to create opportunity for our local community in Manchester, which again was an underprivileged area. And we were able to find, screen, identify, predict who could be successful in this new world and convert them into some of the skills we needed as an employer. And that created an incredible opportunity for literally thousands of young people who, just like me, would never have dreamt of being, a traditional professional in that way. And I'm hoping that AI is going to do that at 10x the scale.
10x the scale, Anna. I mean, I think this is something, if you're optimistic about this change, well, you say, well, actually, AI is going to pull the edifice down. It's going to create this playing field where so many of the wrongs of the past can be put right by the future. Is that just naive, do you think? Or actually, are we at this point of change where this future society that we're rushing towards is suddenly showing signs of being created?
Well, like Lucy, as Lucy said, as well as as well as you, Ash. There's huge potential and advantage. You can see that in the workplace. Advantages to make things more efficient, more accurate, to correct things about our past behaviours that we weren't even aware of before, if we were at the intervention points. But it really needs to be. We really need the conditions in place, the enabling conditions in place at different levels, at individual level, firm level, and at infrastructure, regional and national level. So looping back to the survey, because I haven't got to the exciting bit.
Oh, sorry, I haven't read that. Go on, give us a headline. Go. That's
the headline. Although research and analysis is ongoing, there's a pretty clear link between regional innovate at a sort of regional level, between regional innovation readiness, so including things like infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and investment in education and capital, and good work outcomes. And at a firm level, there's also emerging, increasingly strong evidence that human resource practices and job design that deliberately augments human capabilities, and that includes things like higher levels of information and consultation, is linked with better outcomes in terms of both job quality but also job creation. So it has to be done, in a values-driven way, but in a very deliberate way, a way that's conscious of human design decisions and choices right the way through the tech cycle.
Lou, we hear that saying often in this debate that attitude is the small thing that makes the big difference. I mean, Manchester is a story where we know about that attitude, the Manchester magic, the changes, and actually you see it today, but you saw it in the past in terms of things like the Industrial Revolution, home of that. How do cities take their place as the home of AI? When you hear about national strategies to be the global hub of AI, how does a city get its part of the action?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, you're talking in a kind of place-based way there, and we're seeing that now in some of the productivity data. Greater Manchester's outperforming most European cities now from a productivity and a kind of economic success perspective. Actually, we would attribute that to exactly what you're describing, which is values-led behaviour. So it's really interesting now that kind of what was considered a softer connectivity between being very values-driven as a place and the hardwiring now that we're seeing in terms of infrastructure investment, particularly around the innovation agenda, which we believe for us is a huge part of the reinvention, if you like, of the role of cities in a post-pandemic economy. And cities have changed what their role is forevermore. If you stood in Manchester city centre 150 years ago, you'd have seen a dramatically different set of industries and experiences than you see now. So that flux.
But they were
constant.
super industries of their time.
But
right?
they were
yeah.
the design and the technology industries of our day. We have a school of art because we needed patterns to put on the technology of the day, which was fabric and creating fabric and the looms. And so I think for us that's hardwired into who we are. But I think for lots of regional cities, the innovation agenda that we see, regardless of who's in government, there's going to be a focus on science and technology. The focus on physical place and what's required to drive that innovation agenda, I think, is how we're going to start to see that play out, and a reinvention of what the role of physically meeting and physically convening and creating those interconnectivities.
Ash, just pick that up for us. I'm going to come to you, Tom, as well, because I want to pick up on the policy. But on this thing about how we get ready for it, I interviewed Anthony Selden, and he said, why haven't we got schools of AI? Why haven't we got, where's all the stuff that happened before? Now, if we want to be true leaders at it, what would be on your sort of checklist of things we could get going with to actually step more confidently into the future, do you think?
I mean, it's difficult for the education system to prepare people for, jobs of today, let alone the jobs of tomorrow, because the change is so fast. The context we had up north and the context we work in academies, we were creating about 1,000 jobs a year in the north that was skilled jobs, engineering, data science, product management, and everything in between. And we just couldn't buy the people with the ready-made skills or talent. And there seemed to be no short-term solution for this issue. You could lobby government and say, hey, we need more visas to sponsor people with the skills from outside the country. Or you could complain about the curriculum that's being taught in schools. But we needed a solution here and now. And what we decided to do, and this is what we do now in Academy, is we felt as a major employer, it was incumbent on us to step up and sort out the issues of skill shortages ourselves. And we did that by converting some of our best practitioners, our technologists, and we made them full-time teachers and started to design our own programs, our own curriculums. And we were able then, because we had that capacity to open opportunity for such a vast array of different people who normally wouldn't even get a look in because they don't have the credentials or the experience. And so I think if we're going to prepare ourselves for what potentially could be the biggest and fastest reallocation of talent that we've seen, this thing is probably way bigger, way deeper, way faster than we imagine. I think you're going to need to see industry, business, employers step up and actively participate in the skill system.
Tom, I mean, I'm mindful of that saying that the most feared words in the English language are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. But how does government help AI? How does government actually create that responsible, equitable, fair environment from a policy perspective?
I think this is really hard, and I think what the Shadow Secretary of State was saying, I think resonated. For me, in terms of if I used to work in government, I used to be head of strategy in DfE, so thinking quite a lot about this sort of skills education system implications. If I look at the sort of labour market impact, I think lots of reasons to be optimistic about overall labour productivity, overall UK productivity, which is fantastic. It's important for prosperity. For job creation, yes, and for job quality, I think as well. Like actually AI can essentially automate a lot of the stuff that we all find annoying, frustrating about our jobs, leaving us kind of the fun bits. So all those things, great big tick. I think the thing I am nervous about is the sort of equity inequality aspects. So I think we're already seeing big investments aimed at job reduction in sort of classic non-tech industries. Big reductions in customer service job numbers, all that sort of stuff. It's not apparent to me necessarily that we're going to see the same big job creation in the sort of industries of tomorrow. Yes, of course there will be some, but almost the whole point of the billions of venture investment going into those sort of new industries, new sectors at the moment, is that it can be more productive. It can mean fewer jobs. So I think there is an inequality, and we have to take very, very seriously.
Well, Anna, maybe you could pick up on the inequality point. I'm just looking here at a survey. 81% of graduates across computer sciences, engineering, technology from UK universities are men. I mean, there's a major rewiring that needs to happen, isn't there? I mean, how do we actually take the necessary steps as a society to get this right?
Well, it will need policy interventions right the way across the spectrum and across departments, but sticking perhaps with regulation, where we've started in the first instance, it will include regulation. So, the UK has huge strengths, as we all know, in sort of innovation and research, but it also has strengths in law and governance. And so it's sort of time to perhaps to pull those together, and to lead, I think, in responsible AI, as the Prime Minister says, as the Prime Minister wants to. We will need to think about how we can develop and sort of activate the fantastic principles that we've got in the UK and translate those into a framework of regulation in which sort of the goals are set. The goals are set. There are certain red lines, and there's a move, in line with a preemptive shift nationally and internationally towards early evaluation of risks and impacts. And then the detail can be worked up absolutely on a sector basis or a regulator basis, with domain-specific detail.
But Ash, this whole thing about responsible AI is also about a responsible attitude to people. I mean, without wanting to give you an advertising break to talk about the work of Academy, we've got to think differently, haven't we, in this world? I mean, you kind of raised it a little bit in your intro, right? Which is actually, it makes different opportunities come together more quickly. But actually, in a world that still hasn't got there, how do you bring that world with you to start looking at it differently?
Well, I think it was your stat, 81% of STEM graduates being male, is an interesting case in point in which, for one reason or another, socially or culturally, women, and it's the same story for sort of those from minority ethnic backgrounds and so on, opt out of STEM. We've shown through our work that it's totally possible.
Why is that? Opt out of STEM. What's the blockage we've got to get over?
Oh God, that's a kind of across many dimensions. But I mean, women would when we speak to women, they say, well, that's not for me, or I won't be as good as, or why would I want to do that? So there's a lot of social and cultural conditioning, if you like. What we've been able to show and replicate across maybe 50 different organizations is that it is possible to find people who, had they made different decisions, would be outstanding in the STEM pool, but they opted out. And it's possible to find people and reconvert them back into STEM jobs in technology. And you can quite accurately predict who's going to be successful. And we've been able to do this on many levels by converting people who maybe decided to study humanities or social sciences. But on the other end of the spectrum, people who started a career in, say, things like customer services or delivery driving, and still have outstanding aptitude and potential. And we've been able to convert those people in. So I think, that's bringing alignment between the sort of skills and employers much closer than the current education system.
But do you think, I mean, just because I want to move on to industries actually, but do you think that what we know now might be seen as a kind of form of antique in a very short period of time? I mean, how substantial a change should we be ready for in terms of our skills, in terms of our attitudes, in terms of everything that we take for granted today might be very different because of AI tomorrow?
I think so, and I think the traditional markers, of skills or of talent, of who represents a quality worker, is kind of eroding before our eyes. I don't think degrees are potentially the same signal to employers. Certainly the education itself, what people are learning, is increasingly divorced from the reality of the jobs. So I think you're going to see, because of the rising levels of debt and the expense of doing some of this further education, you're going to see a mass shift in attitude and behavior from our next generation. So all of these things are colliding at the same time. And I think if you're an employer, how you figure out who's relevant, both inside your current workforce and from outside, it's moving so fast. So I think, the system is being reshaped very radically, very quickly.
Lou, Lucy said every worker is a digital worker, I think she said in her speech. Will every worker have to be an AI worker? I mean, what are the industries that you think, we're going to see the changes quickest? I mean, your creative industry background, but where do you see it? What should we be ready for?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for a long time, we've just thought of tech as a horizontal across all sectors. So pretty much everything at a national and a local level that we want to be successful in is going to have to be tech-enabled. You can substitute a component part of that for AI, because increasingly a lot, it already is, and perhaps people don't realise it. To some of your statistics before, it's just we've got a particular media spotlight on AI as a contentious issue at the moment. So I think that kind of level of comfort with digital skills, both for all workers, but then having a pipeline that, as we've seen in our economy, can flow from between those different sectors quite comfortably, and that's going to be our massive challenge.
Right, we're down to our last couple of minutes. What happens next, Tom?
I think we're going to see in the next 5 years, I think we are going to start to see that big acceleration in displacement. So job displacement, job creation. If I look at AI, we've been building AI systems with sort of narrow AI for about the last 6 years. It's sort of, that is in some ways quite inefficient, whereas I think what is the big change that we're seeing now is the sort of general purpose nature. It's just totally reduces the barriers to sort of entry or use for organizations. So I think we're going to see that big acceleration in the next 5 years.
Anna?
We're going to see that, but we're also going to see transformation of work in other ways, which includes augmentation, creation, intensification, telepresence, matching these features of the labour market, which we need to focus on more. The conversation perhaps together makes me think that we need to stop and think now about how we recognise, develop and reward human skills, and perhaps think about, Liz, hearing what you're saying, reframing the whole skills debate, from something that's done to people according to predetermined needs, to working with people to augment their best capabilities.
Ash, Elon Musk answered that very same question by saying, I think we might exceed a one-on-one ratio of humanoid robots to humans very soon.
I'm not qualified to sort of speak.
Disagree with the great Elon.
speak to that, but no, I mean, I'm optimistic. With the right mindset from the people in this room and policymakers and sort of employers, I think we can create an opportunity for a far broader range of people. So I'm excited. That's what we're going to see.
Lou, last word to you.
I think the honest answer is it's in the hands of government and whoever is in government and the policymakers and, to your point, Ash, an industry. I think together they're going to be the biggest drivers of how we deal with the moment. Whatever happens, we're going to look back in 5-10 years and recognise this as a moment. So, I think we've got an opportunity to design it right and in a way that works for everybody. To Lucy's
Love that,
point.
design it right. Big round of applause for your panel. Thanks very much indeed. Cheers.